Hi, this is David Rippey coming at you with more of the Powering Through Paralysis series. This is a reading from my book. The narrator is Alexandria Dupre.
Transportation for disabilities. For most, finding transportation that is affordable, enjoyable, and meets your needs can be a daunting process. Today, there are multiple vehicle manufacturers offering a multitude of product lines and possibilities. Toss in the need for transportation that requires serious modifications due to paralysis, disease, or other debilitating conditions, and the task becomes that much more complicated and challenging. The following chapter on transportation has been presented in a script format to enable the reader to follow the process from start to finish. As this chapter covers quite a bit of technical data, I decided it would be more interesting to do it this way. If a transportation discussion were centered solely on my needs, it would present a very narrow view of what's available to assist people with limited mobility. Consequently, other individuals with unique and special needs are introduced throughout this chapter, providing a broader perspective that accommodates the majority of people who require adaptive modifications. The stories range from a young man with spina bifida, to a recently married paraplegic about to become a father, to a Vietnam veteran, who is a double amputee and getting on in age. All receive guidance from driving specialists who explain the transportation possibilities that exist for them. Picture yourself following along as I take you on a journey to find the right vehicle for me. Screen appears with blue background, white letters showing wording. Transportation for people with disabilities, one of the most important decisions you will make. Pictures will fill sides of screen, depicting people with various disabilities in different situations, whether at work, school, home, or out socially. Dave. Hello and thanks for joining us today. Many of you have experienced life-changing events, which have now made your past transportation methods impossible or very difficult. Transportation is one of the most important decisions you are about to make. This will include the proper vehicle selection and adaptive devices for your new transportation needs. We will cover various adaptive devices for vans and cars if driving is an option. If driving is not an option, we will cover the various equipment available, such as lifts to modifications for vans or cars based on your disability, and the steps necessary to make your travel needs easier. Some of you will require minor changes, while others may require more comprehensive vehicle modifications. We will also cover the necessary pre-driving testing required to determine if driving is an option. Camera pans on one of the pictures on screen, which now opens up, covering screen, showing Dave. I'll be your host to help guide you through this transportation chapter. You or your loved ones have most likely begun to wonder, how will I be able to get around, whether to work, see family and friends, or even go shopping after a life-changing injury or a disease that has hindered my ability to get around independently. I will provide you with ideas, resources, and most importantly, the steps necessary to meet your new transportation needs. Questions will be raised as we work through this. The questions you have will vary from person to person, and this material will help to show you ways to get the answers you seek. You are about to make a very important decision, which vehicle or adaptive devices you need. Each of you now has new, special, and unique circumstances that require proper planning and informed decisions to make your transportation as reliable and comfortable as possible. It isn't possible to cover such a complex and difficult topic with just this chapter, but the information presented here will provide some resources and ideas to help you make a more informed decision. I was involved in a car accident a number of years ago and wish some of the resources available today were around then. My first van was literally purchased over the phone, with no real input on my part. I wasn't that familiar with vans, had never owned one, and had no idea about different modifications and equipment that were available, from lifts to roofs to tie-down systems, and a host of other considerations. The van I eventually purchased, while dependable, was not chosen for my visual needs, and I literally could not see where I was going for the most part. Not being able to drive myself and having assistants who weren't familiar with my various destinations required that I constantly relied on them to call out road signs and landmarks prior to GPS. Of course, having GPS available now makes destinations much easier to reach than in the past. I kept that van for 8 years and 167,000 miles, never seeing very well. If I had spent more time researching and drawing on the experience of others, my van could have been modified and chosen correctly to allow proper visibility. This is just one example of something that could have been done in the beginning to make my driving experience more fulfilling, more enjoyable, and, most of all, safer. Let's go outside and get in the van and visit a certified driver rehab specialist, CDRS, to talk over options that are available. A CDRS should be your first contact when you're ready to find out what options are available. You'll want to set up an appointment and prepare some questions ahead of time. Don't hesitate to ask questions you might feel are silly or embarrassing. Remember, there are no bad questions. Your thoughts, questions, and most importantly, ideas can make your appointment much more productive for you and your loved ones. The adaptive driving specialist, through extensive training and experience, can provide an informed answer to most questions. So ask questions freely, because you are the one who will be driving or using the new vehicle. Fade to black. Camera shows close-up of van with Dave talking while assistant opens lift. Dave. This particular van has a lift that is large and durable, as you can see. My driving rehabilitation specialist recommended this particular type due to my power chair, which is quite large. My chair with me in it weighs 425 pounds, and the chair itself weighs approximately 250 pounds. My assistants try to claim the combination is heavier than that, due to my eating regimen, but I don't agree. Attendant motions with thumb up laughs. Whatever the actual weight of the chair and me, this particular lift can handle it, up to approximately 600 pounds. So for my needs, a lift with this load capacity is necessary. Your needs may be different, as we will show. Let's look at some other recommendations a CDRS made for my transportation needs. Attendant sweeps hand toward door top. Dave. Some of you may have noticed the door opening has been raised, allowing easier access for entry. My chair with me in it sits at approximately 5 feet tall. Being unable to duck well means that without the raised doors, I could not lower my head enough to gain access, and entry would be difficult for me. Because I sit so high inside, a fiberglass roof was added, providing more interior height. You'll especially notice that once I'm inside. The floor has been lowered, in this case 9 inches. These changes provide me the ability to see out of the windows, making for a more enjoyable and safer ride. Some of you may not need the floor lowered as much, depending on your chair height. These are decisions that can be made between you and your driving rehab specialist. I encourage you to go online prior to your meeting and research. There are plenty of examples of modified wheelchair-accessible vans with a variety of adaptations, such as modified lowered floors, raised roofs, and most importantly, lifts that will safely and reliably accommodate you and your chair or scooter. It is my understanding that lifts and lowered floors in full-size vans may be a thing of the past. Ford does not make the Econoline anymore, and some of the newer vans out there may be unable to be modified. Some folks may be looking to modify some of the newer vans, but almost everyone seems to be going for dropped-floor minivans with a ramp. Screen fades to blue. Narrator begins speaking, while pictures of different lifts and ramps start to appear one at a time. If driving is not an option for you, as it isn't for me, you may find that your needs and requirements for a modified van are not as complex. It may be as simple as working with your assigned transportation specialist to design a modified van where only proper tie-down restraints, the lift or ramp, the type of vehicle, and height/clearance are the primary factors in your decision. Even the combination of these considerations will take time, research, and the input of a driving specialist to arrive at the proper vehicle to meet your present and future needs. Adaptive vehicles come in many types. You will work closely with your adaptive driving specialist to determine which options best suit your specific needs. If more than one option can accommodate your particular preferences for entry or ease of operation, then the pros and cons of each choice should be discussed thoroughly as well. Your individual unique questions will help narrow the field. Back to scene. Dave. My assistant will now demonstrate how to work the lift so that we can make it to our appointment. This particular lift has 2 controls, one to raise and lower the lift and one to fold and unfold it. It's very simple to operate, making it quite easy for attendants, family, or friends. Dave backs up and gets on lift while attendant raises the platform. Dave then proceeds into van. Dave. Before we close it up, my assistant will show how to tie down and secure the chair with this tie-down system. Depending on your chair, there are different tie-down systems available. You'll want one that is easy to use, secure, and works best with your particular type of chair. Camera approaches and shows inside van, while the attendant attaches the straps. The attendant holds up the straps while camera focuses on tie-down procedure. Dave. As you can see, this van uses a tie-down system that has 4 individual straps for each corner of the chair to provide a secure and safe ride. Tie-down chair restraint technologies have now evolved to the point where straps have been replaced by tie-down systems that range from retractable to various belt systems to an automatic power lockdown. Your specialist can help you determine which is best for your needs. Give your type of chair or unoccupied scooter. Never sit in a scooter when the van is moving. Always remember, if you're planning to get a different type of chair or scooter soon, let the specialist know so the tie-down system can accommodate your new chair as well. If driving is an option, your tie-down system will vary depending on your chair and if you transfer out of the wheelchair. We'll discuss these possibilities in more detail later. If you have an insurance carrier helping to cover the cost of a new chair, they may resist paying for a new tie-down system, less than several years old or older. If you're covering the cost personally, the additional expense of not taking any future changes under consideration could be costly. Remember, always take into consideration not only your requirements today for a modified vehicle, but also any possible requirements you may need tomorrow. It could save you a lot of worry, cost, and peace of mind that your decision was made properly and will serve you well in the future. My first van had been modified to allow greater visibility by lowering the floor 4 inches. At the time, this allowed more visibility out of the side windows and windshield. After using that van for 12 years, newer vans had been constructed to allow floors to lower as much as 9 inches. The van I'm currently considering allows this and provides me with greater visibility. My understanding is that lowering the floor 9 inches won't sacrifice floor integrity or safety. Those of you with wheelchairs who sit high will work with an adaptive driving specialist to determine the best floor height to suit your needs. Ordering the correct wheelchair is sometimes the most important decision when considering your transportation needs. Some wheelchairs should not be used in transportation, and others cannot be locked down safely. Ordering a rigid frame manual wheelchair without thinking of how to load it into a car is a mistake. If you cannot load the wheelchair in the car, you will need a folding wheelchair that will work with a rooftop carrier. Rigid frame chairs don't work with this wheelchair loading option. If you are debating between a manual and power wheelchair, make certain you can propel yourself up a minivan ramp in a manual chair before you order the van. Well, it looks like we're ready. The chair is properly secured, and now my assistant will close up lift, and we're off to speak with an adaptive driving specialist to find out what possibilities are available today. My appointment was already set, and I brought my list of questions. Camera backs up, showing attendant closing lift. Attendant shuts van doors and camera shoots van driving away. Fade to black. Camera now inside van, filming side of Dave and aimed out front window as van drives up toward rehab hospital. Dave. Well, here we are. We're going to meet Mr. Tom Smith, a CDRS, who will answer some questions for us and provide information on any new technologies or adaptive devices that might be available. Depending on whether driving is an option for you, extensive tests called a pre-driving evaluation will be carried out first to determine which adaptive devices would suit your needs best. We'll discuss these tests later. Besides being a valuable resource, the driving specialist can help share ideas about your insurance or other funding sources to help pay for modifications. Somebody like Tom will have to write up specifications for your vehicle, the adaptive equipment needed, what kind of vehicle you require, and other pertinent information. Van pulls up to front of the hospital. A man is standing on curb with some notebooks in hand. Dave. Looks like Tom's here to meet us. Let's get out. Fade to black. Fade in camera shows van parked. The assistant is opening the doors and putting the lift in position for Dave to exit. Dave rolls onto the lift. When he's on the platform, the assistant lowers the lift and Dave wheels toward Tom. Dave. Hi, Tom. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. I was hoping we could go to your office and you could share some information for us concerning vehicle modifications for people with disabilities and what steps must be followed if driving is an option. Tom. Smiling. I'd be happy to. How's the van? Dave. It's good, Tom, but I've researched and realized there's new possibilities and technologies available. My current van has been terrific, but with necessary repairs and the time involved in getting fixed, it has now become costly and time-consuming. I have over 200,000 miles on this Ford van, and the lift, while working out well, is now starting to show the signs of age, and future safety is becoming a concern. Breaking down unexpectedly is no fun. Tom, I've done some homework and have been online looking at various modified vans and have some questions. I thought I'd share some of my findings with you and get your thoughts. It seems like lifts, vans, and technology in general have come a long way since you and I worked on this old van. Tom: You're right, Dave. You'll be impressed. Let's head to my office where I have helpful resources covering a lot of different disabilities and circumstances. Knowing your needs and van from your last visit will make things easier in your case. We can discuss what's new, what's changed, and what's available today, and I can answer any questions you have. Then, we'll be able to come to a well-thought-out, sensible solution. Sound good to you? Dave: Great, Tom. Lead the way. Camera shoots them entering the rehabilitation hospital, then the doors close behind them. Fades to black. Camera now pans inside Tom's office where everyone is sitting around desk. Dave: Looking at computer monitor, while Tom puts up various examples of modified vans. Well, Tom, the advances in technology and modifications available today are truly amazing. There are so many options. What does your group do to help somebody who is new at this make the right choices? Camera focuses on Tom. Tom: Well, Dave, first we like to get to know the person who needs transportation. We try to find out what his or her needs are, and just as important, what their transportation goals are. We need to know about their insurance or other funding sources. We look at their mobility, if they use a wheelchair, and more importantly, if they can transfer out independently, or if they will drive from the wheelchair. If they stay in their chair to drive, we'll look at various examples of vans. If they can transfer out of the wheelchair, we will explore the options available in certain makes or models that can accommodate them, everything from minivans to SUVs to full-size vans. If the individual needs a transport van, meaning the van would transport them, but they are not the driver, we would discuss the requirements of the van based on the wheelchair and access. Of course, if driving is an option, we'll work closely with their physical and occupational therapists to assess the individual's physical and cognitive abilities. They will work closely with the therapist who might be prescribing a new wheelchair. The therapists will consult on chairs, transfers, splints if needed, seating, and overall physical capabilities. That will help in making determinations on various hand controls or steering aids. These controls will serve as their brake and gas pedal and perform other functions they would normally perform using their feet and legs. If they are unable to drive themselves, we look toward transportation that's easy and convenient for them and their caretakers or family to use. That's usually a modified van with a lift and raised roof. This has changed to a minivan with a folding ramp, unless the electric chair with the occupant sits higher than the ceiling height allows. With those basics in mind, we would look at various options available depending on need. In your case, Dave, as I'm sure you remember, visibility was important to you as you travel quite frequently. Because your chair sits so tall, a lowered floor helped compensate for this and allows you to better see out of the windows. From your research online, you know that lowering a floor has become easier, safer, and can be done much deeper than was previously possible. A lowered floor serves several purposes. It provides more visibility for the person needing the modifications and offers more headroom for the attendant or family member to move around while securing the wheelchair or helping the passenger with their needs. In most cases, a win-win for all. Dave: You're right, Tom. I wish somebody like you were around when I got my first van, as I might have avoided a lot of problems. Today, specialists like you are easier to seek out, available through a hospital, rehabilitation center, VA, or certain insurance carriers. A well-thought-out game plan for a modified vehicle suited for the recipient and those who assist can make everyone's driving experience more enjoyable, safer, and more rewarding. Camera focuses on Tom. Tom: Things have changed for the better, Dave. Good resources are available today to make a proper choice for transportation. We work closely with families, therapists, and conversion companies to ensure we're all on the same page when it comes to meeting unique transportation needs. We try in all circumstances to answer each individual's questions fully, because they are ultimately the ones who will be most affected by the final outcome. Today, you can find good information in a variety of sources. It's easier than ever to talk to individuals with similar physical limitations and ask what they've learned from their vehicle experiences and what they might have done differently. Also, adaptive driving specialists like me can help clear up questions, and if we don't have the answers, we'll find people or resources that do. Dave. Tom, can you tell us what the process is in order to be able to drive? Tom. Well, Dave, individuals with paraplegia, lower-level quadriplegia, upper and lower extremity amputations, hemiplegia from a stroke or brain injury, or visual impairments would all participate in the same evaluation process. We test quite extensively to ensure the safety of those who have entrusted us to help them, and of course, the safety of the driving public. Screen fades to blue. The screen appears with words below, one at a time, narrator saying them as they appear. Pre-driving evaluation. Basic vision screening. This is what the eyes do: acuity tracking, depth perception, field of vision. Motor ability. Balance testing. Cognitive screening. Visual perceptual testing. This is more about how the brain processes what is seen. Reaction time testing. One of the first things to consider is muscle strength and function, as well as balance. We evaluate your arms and legs for the potential to drive with either foot or hand controls. Most times people think of hand controls, but there are adaptations we can make to enable an individual to drive with foot controls. We examine sensation, particularly the sense of movement and pressure, to see if the individual has control of his or her extremities. It is important to evaluate sitting balance, unsupported as well as supported in a chair, so we can make the most appropriate recommendations. You need to think about the motions that occur in a moving vehicle, and the driver needs to maintain good balance at all times. These are some of the things your physical therapist, PT, or occupational therapist, can help us with prior to the evaluation, if the Certified Driving Rehab Specialist, CDRS, is not an OT. An example is that to push to brake is a natural response to stop, whether it is your arms or legs that push. A driver needs to have enough balance to extend the arm or leg forward and enough strength to push the brake, while maintaining their sitting balance and steering responses. Another reason we look at strength and range of motion is because we can adjust the size or tension on the steering wheel as needed. We can only make accommodations if we have an accurate assessment of your abilities. That leads us to the next phase of the pre-driving assessment, cognition. You need to be able to follow directions, as well as have intact sequencing, good memory, and intact executive functioning, your ability to determine cause and effect and problem solve, for example. Topographical orientation is a consideration as well. This is your direction-finding orientation, as it's important that you can find your way back. Sometimes people who have had a stroke or a head injury have difficulty with this. Some states may require you to pass the rules of the road test, including traffic rules and signs. After assessing your physical abilities and your cognition, we proceed to the next part of the pre-driving assessment, the visual perceptual assessment. These tests not only tell us how accurately you see, but also what your field of vision is, what your brain processes that you see, and how quickly it is processed or retained. Some visual perception deficits can be compensated for with the use of additional or enlarged mirrors. Mirrors don't really help perception per se. They usually help compensate for neck rotation limitations. We can't use mirrors to compensate for visual field loss. The person must meet the state standards for both peripheral vision and visual acuity, your ability to scan your environment, fixate on an object and track it, quickly identify an object in your peripheral vision, accurately move your eyes from one object to another, and to judge depth or distance are all essential to safe driving. When we have determined your physical abilities, cognitive ability to follow directions, and that you can see/process stimuli, we would next test your reaction time. This is one of the most important parts when we are evaluating someone's potential for driving, since we cannot use equipment to compensate for this. An individual must be able to react to visual stimuli accurately and consistently within a specific time, usually mere seconds. This ensures that a driver can respond to unexpected oncoming traffic or a child coming out into traffic between cars. Using standardized testing machines and comparing those results with the minimum standards needed to drive, we can objectively and consistently determine an individual's reaction time for driving. Camera fades to blue. Pictures of various hand control adaptive equipment begin to appear, each one relating to the dialogue when presented. Tom. If an individual passes the pre-driving evaluation, we begin looking at what equipment, if any, they will need in their car or van. There are several places to start, depending on the individual's unique situation. If he or she already owns a car or van, and they want that one adapted for them, we need to start from the inside out. If the individual is starting from scratch, we can start from the entrance to the vehicle and work from there. For the purpose of explanation, let's start with a wheelchair user who needs transportation. He or she can drive from the wheelchair. I would first look at the wheelchair used and the individual sitting in the wheelchair, the overall height, the lap height, and the combined weight of the chair and the individual. If the individual uses power mobility, I would begin with a van entrance and height requirement. Lifts that fold to allow a line of vision out of the window, lifts that swing out so others can enter without using the lift, and the more traditional type of lifts. From there I consider the tie-down system, the method we would use to secure the chair in place. This would be different for someone who drives from the wheelchair and someone who is a passenger. A big difference is that the passenger has someone else secure the wheelchair, but a driver needs a system that will secure the wheelchair by itself. This will vary depending on the wheelchair design. When we determine the entrance and lift, we then look at either lowering the floor of the van or raising the roof, and sometimes we need to do both. If someone is a passenger, then we could stop there. If someone is a driver, then we need to determine if they are transferring to the captain's seat to drive or driving from the wheelchair. That also makes a difference for the tie-down system. Next we look at the adaptive driving controls. Let's start with hand controls. There are several types of hand controls for the brakes and accelerator. One is a push to apply the brake and right angle to accelerate. Another is a push to apply the brake and pull to accelerate. A more recent control is push to apply the brake and rock to apply the gas. The mechanics are different. The selection is based on operator preference, upper extremity, arm musculature balance, legroom, and the actual car. Although the resistance and sensitivity can be adjusted, sufficient strength is still needed to operate a hand control. The driver must be able to do this without losing control of the contralateral side, so they can still steer the vehicle with the other hand. Typically, the strongest arm is used for steering. If the arm strength is equal, the hand control is usually on the left side. The left side controls are installed onto the steering column, and so the interior layout of the car must be considered. There must also be sufficient room above your leg and the hand control to pull down the accelerator, if using the right angle, and ample room to pull or push to full excursion. Other considerations include your hand dominance. Spinner knobs are illegal for people who don't require them medically. They were also called suicide knobs and used many years ago by drivers to assist with turns while driving at high rates of speed. Although it is illegal to drive with a spinner knob in many states, it is required when you drive with hand controls. Your hand cannot leave the wheel, and so you need the spinner to make full, complete turns. Dave. Grinning. I don't think I'll have to worry about high speed, Tom. Tom. Laughing. Good to hear. Fade to blue pictures of various adaptive controls being used. Tom. Your ability to turn the steering wheel depends on your range of motion and strength. This can be adjusted by changing the size of the steering wheel or by providing splints that support your arms or hand on the steering wheel. This one is called a taco because of its shape. It supports the driver's wrist and forearm. This is a tri-pin that holds the wrist and hand in position. All of these can be customized for an individual's specific needs and positioning requirements. Specialty controls include smaller steering wheels for decreased range of motion, also good for arthritics, though this is rarely done today, and or reduced effort steering for turning. Electronic gas and brake systems can make driving possible, even if the driver is very weak. There are even digital steering systems, as well as a joystick that does gas, brake, and steering all in one control. There are many options for secondary controls, turn signals, horn, high beams, shifting, ignition, including voice-activated systems. This is considered a complicated system and requires considerable training. Back to scene. Dave. What if someone has hemiplegia from a stroke and can only use one side of their body? How can they steer and drive? Tom. Great question, Dave. Well, if they pass the pre-driving exam, we accommodate their weak side. This may involve a left accelerator pedal, similar to the one we would use for right lower extremity amputees, for someone with right-sided weakness. We would use the spinner knob on the steering wheel, so their hand does not leave the wheel while driving. There are various hand controls on the table, and Tom is showing them to Dave. Tom. Dave, I have some examples of various hand controls, which can be used in most cars or vans. The hand controls will have a button on them to operate the horn, again so your hands do not leave the steering wheel or the hand control. Dave, it is important to remember that there are numerous manufacturers, and I cannot stress this point enough. The design and configuration of your car will determine the type of hand control that will best meet your needs. Although most can be interchanged, it is not always possible, and you may need to purchase new hand controls when you get a new car. I suggest people keep their old controls, since they may be able to use them later. There are also adaptations for people who have enough leg movement that they do not need hand controls. An example is a left accelerator for someone with a right lower extremity amputation, or someone with right leg weakness, who is unable to operate the accelerator quickly enough to pass the standards. Your right leg must be able to move from the accelerator to the brake quickly enough and accurately enough to stop. This is why the reflex testing process is used in a pre-driving evaluation. If the driver must drive with the left leg, there is a left accelerator pedal that must be installed to allow someone to drive using the left leg, to prevent having to extend all the way over to the right side to accelerate. Very few vendors sell the left foot gas pedal anymore, due to liability issues. If at all possible, CDRSs will steer people to hand controls, unless there is no other option. In the future, you may not be able to obtain this pedal. Equipment manufacturers may stop making them. Camera fades to blue. Pictures of different cars equipped with various mirrors fill the screen. We also use mirrors to compensate for decreased head and neck range and decreased field of vision. Mirrors only help you see what is behind you, and in some cases can help you see to the sides. We never use mirrors to compensate for visual field loss. This does take training and getting used to while driving. Back to scene. Dave. Interesting, Tom. So many things to consider. Tom. Well, Dave, it's all individualized to fit the driver and the vehicle. These are all components, and we call it a system since we mix and match components and put all the pieces together to make it work successfully for each individual's needs. Dave. Wow, Tom, so in-depth and helpful. I'm sure a lot of people have benefited from your experience and guidance. I'm afraid now my strength isn't quite sufficient to drive, but hopefully going forward, the strides in spinal cord research and technology will continue to grow. Tom. Amen. The progress in the last 20 years has been incredible, and in the last 5 years has been nothing short of spectacular. Camera focuses on Dave. Dave. Now, Tom, if a person is successful in the pre-driving evaluation, what is the next step that would need to be taken? Tom. If the pre-driving evaluation is successful, then we try to determine if you are a candidate for driving training. You must take your state's test to be licensed to drive with adapted equipment. If you drive with hand controls without being licensed for their use, you are driving illegally and are therefore liable in any accident. If you are licensed to drive with hand controls and do not use them, you are driving illegally and again are liable in any accident. Being liable means your insurance company may not pay for the accident. After successful driving training and passing the state driver's exam, a specific prescription is written for your vehicle. Dave. Can you tell us a little more about getting licensed if the pre-driving evaluation and driving training are successful? Tom. Each state has its own process and procedure for licensing, but some basic rules apply to all. The driver must schedule an appointment at the driving testing center and must bring a vehicle adapted with the required adaptive driving equipment. This is because the licensing is not only to drive, but also to use the equipment indicated. Dave. Tom, so many things to take care of initially, so let me get this straight. Camera fades to blue. White lettering list of choices put on screen one at a time. Successfully pass pre-driving evaluation. Determine adaptive driving equipment needs. Driving training using proper adaptive equipment. Licensing/taking driver's test in rehab programs vehicle. Prescription written so your vehicle can be modified. Back to scene. Dave. Tom, it doesn't seem too cumbersome or difficult when we look at it that way. By taking it one step at a time, it can be a manageable and obtainable goal. How long do you think this process can take if we follow all the steps? Tom. Well, Dave, that is difficult to determine. Our typical initial evaluation is 2 to 3 hours. The pre-driving assessment is conducted during the first hour, and the vehicle evaluation to determine the equipment needs is conducted the second hour. It's the driving training that can take the most time, and that varies from individual to individual. Some people need minimal equipment and are able to pick it up quickly, while others need more time to learn how to use the equipment. Most times we need to make minor adjustments on the equipment to get it just right. This is why it's important to do the training with a CDRS, someone with the equipment and knowledge to make adjustments. Tom. Handing Dave's attendant a folder. Well, Dave, here is your write-up on your van modification needs. Dave. Thanks, Tom. I'll let you know how I make out. Fade to black. Dave. I've already talked to my insurance company concerning funding for the particular modifications I'll need. You will need to research various funding sources available to you for your modification needs. If insurance or governmental agencies, Office of Vocational Rehab or the Veterans Administration, are unable to provide financial assistance, then other options may be appropriate. Possibilities may include a benefit event, personal resources, or a loan. Some auto manufacturers provide $1,000 rebates on vehicles that are modified to enable people with disabilities to drive or be transported. Be sure to research these possibilities before you select your actual vehicle. Now that I have the specifications for the modifications, I can meet with the van conversion company to get their recommendations for the most appropriate van to meet my specifications. Information is available on many conversion companies today. You can research these on the internet through publications through your CDRS or others with disabilities who have had a positive experience with a conversion company. When selecting a van conversion company, remember that they will also be an ongoing source for information and provide regular maintenance on your vehicle modifications. It is important in the decision-making process to incorporate the price of the vehicle, dependability, and most importantly, ease of operation for the people involved in your transportation. If you are capable of driving, the van conversion company can help you determine which vehicle will best accommodate your particular modifications. Be sure to ask your van conversion company plenty of questions to ensure that the vehicle you select will accommodate the modifications necessary to meet your physical needs as well as your lifestyle. These considerations include your method of transfer, transporting others, and storage of your mobility devices, such as a walker or wheelchair. We will meet with the van conversion company tomorrow. I have always found it helpful to research as many different sources as possible before making a decision that's this important. You may have done this before when purchasing a vehicle, but now it's even more important to make an educated decision because you cannot afford to make mistakes. People have made very costly mistakes by purchasing a vehicle ahead of time, only to find out that it will not work out as well as they had envisioned. Be sure that everyone involved has approved the vehicle and has assured you that it will meet your needs before you put any money down. Because of your individualized modifications, other substitutes like rental care, no matter how temporary, will most likely not be feasible. We can discuss these later. Camera fades to blue. White lettering list of choices put on screen one at a time. Narrator recites them as they appear. Sources of information. Certified driver rehab specialists, CDRS, and van conversion companies. Internet/library/rehabilitation centers. Converted van or car owners, great source. Fade to black. Scene Dave and van talking while van pulls up to conversion company. Dave. Let's get out and talk to these guys. By the number of vans on their lot you can tell they are pretty busy. My vehicle completion is not as urgent as others since I already have a van, but if you are looking at modified transportation for the first time, it is important to discuss the conversion company's backlog to see how long it will take. Other conversion companies might be as qualified, but not currently as busy. The camera pans across the company lot with many converted vans lined up. Dave's van pulls up and stops, and Dave gets out. The camera shows Dave's van being approached by two guys, Jack the owner and John, the head engineer. Dave. Hey, how is everybody? John and Jack smile, exchanging greetings with everyone. Jack. Hi Dave, this is John, and he's our head engineer and can answer any questions you may have on floors, lifts, roof, etc. Tom, your adaptive driving specialist, called and discussed the lowered floor with us as well. It seems like we all have a good understanding of what you need and want. John has assured Tom and me of the floor integrity or stability after it's been lowered. We're happy to report that if anything, they're stronger and can now be lowered 9 inches instead of 4. Dave. Terrific. One of my questions was whether we could lower the floor any further. Great, now my visibility on drives has gotten that much better. John. That's right, Dave, and your lift manufacturer has a new lift that provides twice the strength at only 60% of the weight. It gets a little technical, but part of it is the better steel alloys we use. Plus, the new lift you're considering folds into a nice cube, which for the first time will allow a family member, friend, or attendant to get in the side of the van, even with the lift folded. Wrong lift I had installed for my van, which allows for side entry when folded. It's a very nice option, Dave. Your other lift, as you told us, has been very reliable and worked out well, but technologies change. I think you'll like the new features of this lift even better. We actually have one of them on the lot. Want to try it? Dave. Sure, better to try it now before we install it. The camera pans to new van with lift unfolded. John is standing at the door working the controls. John. Go ahead and get on it, Dave. Dave backs up and gets on lift. John raises the lift and Dave rolls inside the van. Dave. It's very smooth and it's lighter weight, so it puts less stress on the van. John. It's real nice. Want to check out some of the new tops available. Dave. That was one of my next questions. Have they changed much? John. Yes, they're more aerodynamic and molded to conform to vans better, appearing almost seamless. The camera pans to a new van with a new top type. John. Of course it will be painted when finished. It'll be hard to tell where the van ends and the roof addition begins. The camera moves from the van top to Jack, the owner, approaching. Jack. Well, Dave, what do you think? Dave. Jack, I like the new changes, definitely an improvement. I'm glad I came out before my new van arrived to discuss these new possibilities. John. That's right, Dave. A responsible conversion company wants to be known for their dependability and integrity. By helping and guiding a new conversion van or modified car buyer early in the process, you can save time and avoid problems later on. I called your Ford dealer after we talked and made sure he had the right vans for you to choose from to make sure the modifications you require were possible. I think you'll be happy with the E250 as it meets your requirements for visibility, comfort, and reliability. Dave, I'm learning it's becoming more rare for a person to buy a van from the standard dealer now. Today, that's usually a mistake, as conversion companies like Braun typically order vans directly from the factory and will only modify those vans. One guy bought a van from a dealer because he liked the color, only to discover that Braun would not modify that particular van due to airbag issues. He had to return the van to the dealer at a significant loss. Dave. Thanks for that information, John. My support staff working together, Tom the CDRS, the Ford dealer, and your conversion company, has made the process smooth and painless. You guys will be ready to see me go after this. Dave laughs. Jack. Not so, Dave. Everybody wants you satisfied, and getting it right the first time lets us avoid problems that should have been handled earlier. You want to go in and see what you can do on the inside of the van as far as seats and interior. Dave. Lead the way. The camera pans through the shop where vans are being assembled. Jack stops and points to a van under construction. John. Dave, see that van there? We were under construction, and the client failed to tell us he was getting a new chair. When the van was finished, he came to pick it up and the chair was too big for the lift. He left disappointed, and we're now installing a bigger platform for him. If he had stayed in touch and kept us apprised, we could have easily avoided this and installed the correct lift from the beginning. So we never feel a new client is bothersome or asks too many questions. Camera fades to blue, narrator begins. By discussing a new chair or scooter that you are getting or considering with your rehab specialist on the front end, you can avoid problems like these with your van. Make sure your adaptive vehicle specialist is aware of any changes to your vehicle, such as measurements of your new chair or scooter, physical considerations, etc., so they can plan and discuss with your van conversion company prior to any installation or modified equipment recommendation. This could help you avoid a lot of cost, stress, and time in the completion and vehicle acceptance process. Dave. Thanks, John. I feel better now. Don't worry, I don't plan on getting a new chair soon. I suppose that since the average van can last 10 years and a typical chair can last 4 or 5 years, that's something that should be considered also. In other words, making sure the van can accommodate any changes you might be able to foresee. John. That's right, Dave. Forewarned is forearmed, or something like that. The camera fades as they exit shop area and go into office. The camera, now inside office, pans over John, Jack, Dave, and the assistant, all seated around a table. Jack is pointing on his computer monitor the van that Dave is considering with a lift installed that they all agreed would meet Dave's needs. The van has slightly tinted windows. Dave. So these windows come tinted. With a 9-inch lowered floor, visibility should be much greater than it is in my current vehicle. Jack. Pointing to picture of van on screen. Dave, I think you'll find that 9 inches will provide you with greater visibility, and based on your van's make and model, a 9-inch lowered floor would be as low as we go. Essentially, we want maximum protection for you and your passengers in case of an accident. Dave looks thoughtful. Dave. I understand, and I think that the possible height you recommended will provide good visibility and safety too. Now can we have a side door lift, a couch in back, and some captain's chairs up front? Jack. Nodding his head. That will work, and here are some of the examples available. The camera fades with everybody looking at various interior possibilities. The screen fills with blue-white letters bearing words, van conversion checklist. Make sure the conversion meets your needs. Try to foresee any future changes. Stay in touch with the conversion staff through the entire process. Communicate with the support staff, important. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Back to scene. Everybody is getting up from the table. The meeting appears to be over for now. Dave. Jack and John, I appreciate your help, and don't worry, I'm sure I'll have more questions. Everybody laughs. Dave. Well, Jack, besides helping people who cannot drive and require a passenger van, I understand your company also works with people with a variety of disabilities and needs. Jack. That's right, Dave. Since we knew you were coming in today, I thought you might like to meet some clients coming in for conversions. As a matter of fact, our client Scott is scheduled to arrive in a couple of minutes. Scott is a paraplegic and has been driving a car for years with hand controls. However, he was married a year ago and has a baby on the way, so he is trading in his car for a minivan. Scott needs to be able to drive and put the baby in the van independently, so we need to consider that when we look at how he enters the van. A lifestyle change often affects your transportation needs, and we see many clients come back to us repeatedly as their life changes and their van or car needs evolve. These changes are not just starting a family, but can also include physical changes, which we'll explore further. Look, here he comes. The camera pans to a car pulling up. Dave. So Scott is trading in a car for a minivan due to lifestyle changes. Jack. That's correct. As he changes from his modified car to a minivan, we will have to see what new modifications he'll need to accommodate his ability to drive. He will require a new driving evaluation to go over new hand controls for the van, as his car driving modifications won't be the same. Based on the new driving modification evaluation for the minivan, we'll be able to determine what, if any, of his old system we'll be able to carry over. Hopefully some of the equipment will be adaptable to the new minivan, which could save him some money. I'm sure he can use it now with a new baby on the way. Everybody nods in agreement and laughs. Jack. Why don't we go out and introduce you to Scott, and you can ask him questions about his situation. The camera shows Scott exiting his car and transferring into a wheelchair. Scott wheels up to Dave and Jack. Jack. It's good to see you again, Scott. This is Dave. He was just saying what a nice car you're driving. Scott. Thanks, Dave. Since I just got married and have a little one on the way, I'll be trading it in for a minivan. It will be easier on my wife and me and, of course, better for our new baby. I wanted to get an early jump on the process and have been researching minivans that may meet my needs. I've worked with Jack before, and he graciously invited me here to discuss some possibilities and answer questions I have. That will be helpful after working with my adaptive driving specialist. Dave. Maneuvering around the car. Oh yeah. Jack told me you were expecting. Congratulations. So, what did your CDRS recommend after you asked questions and shared your needs? Scott. Well, Dave, we had a lot to talk about. I initially wanted to avoid a lift. I am able to transfer into the minivan and pull my chair unaided, and thought I would be able to do that with a baby as well. However, I need to be able to carry a baby into the minivan and put him, at least, I hope it is a him, into the car seat. Laughs. The problem is, I can't reach the rear seats from outside the van to put the baby in. When the baby is in the front seat, I would have to transfer differently. It's important to me to be able to do this myself. We discussed ramp options, which I thought would work initially, but when I tried it, I couldn't push my chair and hold the baby securely. I have more trouble getting up the ramp with the baby in my lap, so we're getting a special winch-type device to help me get up the ramp while I hold the little tyke. That way he can climb into the van himself when he's older. It will also give my wife easier access to get to the baby if she's using the van, without her having to use the lift. I was glad I went to the CDRS, because he really spent a lot of time discussing my options with my wife and me. They thought of things I hadn't considered, like my wife being able to get in and out easily. Dave. That's a good point, Scott. A CDRS can help you not only with your current needs, but also help find solutions for future needs. So, are you driving from your wheelchair or transferring to the captain's seat? Scott. That was a difficult decision. We decided that it would be easier for me to drive from the wheelchair. That way it's easier to get the baby in the car with a minimum of transfers. We can convert it to the captain's seat later if I want, right, Jack? Jack. I would advise against driving from the chair, unless you absolutely cannot transfer over to a captain's chair. It is much safer to drive from an original equipment manufacturer, OEM seat, plus there would be a seat there for your wife to use when she drives the van. I would never tell someone to drive from his or her chair, unless it was an absolute physical requirement. Scott. Thanks for that information, Jack. I can transfer from my wheelchair to an OEM seat. Let's plan on that. It will be good that my wife can drive the van as well. Jack. That's right, Scott. By you working with your driving specialist concerning future considerations and letting us know in advance, we will put in A for a tie-down system that meets your needs now and in the future. You need to be aware that this is not an easy conversion, but we have done it before. We just need to plan ahead, so I'm glad we know this in advance. Here comes John, our head engineer. Scott, this may be a good time for you to discuss these issues with John. Jack. Dave, why don't you follow me, and we'll go meet one of our oldest clients. Dave. Thanks for the time, Scott. Good luck with your minivan and congratulations on your new baby on the way. Scott. Thanks, Dave. The camera pans to Jack and Dave walking away. The camera fades to blue. Words appear on the screen. While future plans may be uncertain, if the possibility exists to build a modified van or car that can meet your needs now and possibly in the future, work toward those goals. This could include possible lifestyle changes, chair or scooter changes, physical changes, changes that are unique to you. The camera shows Jack and Dave talking to a man named Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith is an elderly gentleman who's approximately 75 years old. He has a wry sense of humor. He is sitting in his wheelchair. Mr. Smith. You know, Jack, when I was your age, I had a tryout with the Brooklyn Dodgers as an outfielder and any other position that was open. Hell, I just wanted to play. Then I was in Vietnam and lost my legs to shrapnel. A little hard to run around the bases without those. Mr. Smith cackles. Dave. I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Smith. Now can you share with us why you are here? Mr. Smith. Well, young man, I have been very active despite not having legs. I used artificial legs for a long time, then a wheelchair when that got too difficult. But I could still get in and out of the car and pull this old wheelchair in myself. See that Buick over there? That's a real car from when American workers made American cars with American. Can't get one like that anymore. But that's not what you asked, is it? Getting back to what you asked. I went to the VA because I was having some problems getting out of the car. I thought some therapy or vitamins might help. They suggested getting a van with a lift, but I thought that was ridiculous. But it kept getting more and more difficult, and I wasn't going out as much because it was so hard to get in and out of the car. I actually needed my wife to help me. That's when I decided I needed to make a change. So I went back to the VA and talked to the driving specialist. He made recommendations for a van that I could still drive. It even has an extra step so my wife can climb in. I figured I may be getting older, but I won't let it stop me from getting where I want to go. So Jack, here's what the guy at the VA wrote up. What do you think? Mr. Smith hands over specifications, which Jack accepts and reviews. Jack. Mr. Smith, this looks like it will meet your new needs and your wife's needs. I may call the VA just to check on one or two things. In the meantime, why don't I get Bob to show you vans that meet the specifications you require? Mr. Smith. Jack, does Bob know what the hell he's talking about? You know my questions can get pretty complex sometimes. Jack. Smiles, putting his hand on Mr. Smith's shoulders. Don't you worry, Mr. Smith. When I found out you were coming in, I specifically chose Bob to help you because he has worked with some of our more difficult, complex clients. Mr. Smith. Thanks. It was nice meeting you, Dave. You're a pretty healthy-looking guy. Ever play ball? Dave. Not at your level, Mr. Smith, but I did enjoy throwing it around and hitting it occasionally. The camera pans to Bob and Mr. Smith going toward some vans. Jack and Dave are talking alone. Dave. What an interesting guy. His needs seem pretty straightforward. Jack. For the most part they do, Dave. I just want to touch base with the VA about Mr. Smith's wheelchair. Right now he's still in a manual wheelchair, and I would like to know if they think he might be switching to a power chair in the future. It will help to know when we plan the overall seated height. It's different from a manual to a power wheelchair. Dave. Well, Jack, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt. I'll be out here looking at the new vans. Jack. Okay, Dave. This shouldn't take long. We do a lot of business with the Virginia. The camera pans out to lot with a van pulling up. A 16-year-old man gets out with a side lift. His mother and father get out of the front of the van. Matt. Hey, man. Have you seen Jack around? Dave. Yeah, he just went inside to make a quick phone call. Matt. Checking out Dave. So, what's your story? Was it sports? Mother. Matt, where are your manners? I am so sorry. Dave. It's okay. I get asked that a lot. Actually, I was injured running for the winning touchdown in the Sugar Bowl 15 years ago. We won the game on that score because I was able to hold on to the ball even though I was paralyzed from the neck down. Matt. How did you do that? Dave. Good question, Matt. You caught me. Actually, it was something as mundane as a car accident. Everybody laughs. Dave. So, that's my story. How about yourself? Matt. Pretty simple, man. I was born with spina bifida. Dave. So, what brings you here to see Jack? Matt. I just turned 16, and I want to start driving. Dave. That's great. So what steps did you take to get to that point? I know from talking to my CDRS that a pre-driving evaluation is needed. How did that go? Matt. Well, I'm here, aren't I? Mother. Matt. Fine. I passed that and went to get my permit, which involved taking a computer test. It was easy. They came up with the controls I needed, and I have been taking driving lessons ever since. My driving instructor thinks I'll be ready for the road test in a month. Dave. That's great, Matt. Glad to hear everything is going so well. The camera points to Jack exiting his office, walking toward the group. Matt. Shaking Jack's hand. Yo, dude. My parents told me they talked to you about getting this old van fixed up for me to drive. They even said you could hook me up with a bed, refrigerator, and TV. Father. Matt, this van is for you to get to work, not to party with your friends. Matt. I know, Dad. If I got tired or hungry, it would come in handy, though. Everyone laughs. Father. Handing Jack a folder. In all seriousness, Jack, here are the specifications for Matt to be able to drive the van. Now I looked them over and want to make sure that Cheryl and I can still drive it too. Jack. Looking in folder. Well, according to this, Matt will be transferring into the captain's seat. The hand controls will not interfere with either of you or even one of Matt's friends operating the van. Someone can still drive using his or her feet. But it's important to remind you that it's illegal for you to drive with the hand controls unless you're licensed to drive with them. Matt. Don't worry about that, Jack. My father couldn't pass the test. Father. Matt, should we just go home now? I think we have had enough of your sense of humor for today. Matt. Sorry, Dad. Let me show you a van that I think is cool. Of course, I'll be saving my work money toward buying it. Father. Okay, Matt. 1 minute. Jack, is there anything else? Jack. Well, Mr. Jones, your van will need to be here roughly 3 to 4 weeks to install the lift, tie-downs, hand controls, and other adjustments. Have you considered what you are going to do for transportation for Matt in the meantime? Father. Depending on Matt's behavior, our car's trunk might be an option. Everyone laughs. In all seriousness, his mother or I will drive. On days that we can't, Matt can make arrangements with friends and is now checking into what programs may be available from the state, from attendant assistance to paratransit and their routes. We're pretty excited about everything that might be available to assist Matt and have been actively researching on the internet and making calls. It's much easier now that we can fill out most applications online and send them that day. Matt. Dad's right, Jack. There's great material on the web, and I've been helping to search the web with some voice-activated technology equipment I now have. Now let's go look at those vans. I want to show you some of the things I would like to get. Jack, I'll also email you some links to different accessories I'm considering, and you and your team can let me know if it's possible to install them, and whether I mean Dad, can afford them. Everyone laughs again. The camera pans to Matt and his parents going off to look at various vans on the lot. Jack and Dave stand together. Jack. Any idea when your van will be delivered? We want to make sure to keep our books clear that week. Dave. The Ford dealer thought that it would be in about 3 weeks. Jack. Taking out small notepad and writing in it. Great, we'll put it down and let us know if that changes. Dave. Sure will. The camera fades out and then comes back to show Dave back at home. Dave. Well, we've covered a lot of information in a relatively short amount of time. You probably have questions or thoughts about your needs for the conversion specialist. Now is a good time to write these down, so you will remember them later. If it's easier, put them in a Word document on your computer to email to your driving specialist and van conversion company, so everyone is in the loop on what you're considering. If you are able to drive, you may want to think about the pros and cons of a car versus a van or minivan, your future needs in the next 5 years or so, and any financial considerations. Think about the people we met and the changes and choices they made to meet their transportation needs for now and in the future. The camera fades to a blue screen. Words appear. Van/minivan conversion considerations. Lift and roof choices. Seating possibilities. Proper tie-down system if driving. Accessibility for other passengers. Window choices for visibility. Other options and considerations not listed. Car conversion considerations. Transmission, automatic or manual. Number of doors and access for driver and passengers. Mobility device storage for a wheelchair, walker, or scooter. Adequate space for full excursion of controls. Other options and considerations not listed. Camera fades, now close-up of Dave. Dave. Are the methods and procedures making sense to you so far? Good. First and foremost, remember that you'll be using this vehicle for a long time, so plan well. I'm going to look these over a little more before my meeting tomorrow with the Ford dealership representative. Remember to jot down any questions or ideas you may have. Don't be afraid to call your driving specialist or conversion company back, or send them an email or text with any questions or concerns before meeting the representative from the dealerships. Also, send them links of ideas and considerations you have come across while researching on the internet or from speaking with others with conversion experience. To make my van conversion experience easier and have the completed van meet my needs now and in the future, I have been in touch with all the parties involved, from dealership to rehab specialist to a conversion company, regularly through this whole process. This lets me see what's possible, keep everyone in the loop, and arrive at a van that I'm ultimately happy with. The camera fades to black. The camera is now inside of the van, which is outside of a Ford dealership. A smiling salesman approaches. Dave. We're now going to talk to a representative from Ford, with whom I'll provide my specifications for a van. At this stage, your van conversion company has already reviewed your specifications and provided various makes and models of vehicles that will meet your transportation specifications and choices. This is a good time to review the list of makes and models provided by the van conversion company and begin looking for a vehicle that will meet your needs physically, socially, and financially. The camera fades to black. The camera shows Dave talking to the vendor. Vendor. Smiling. Hi Dave, did you find out what you need? Dave. Yes, we did. The floor will have to be lowered for better visibility. I understand that only certain models will accommodate that requirement. Also, I understand that I can get a van with windows all the way around or a panel van and let the van conversion company put them in. I'm pretty sure I want a panel van so that I can get bigger windows installed. Salesman. Yes, Dave. I did some checking as you asked and found out that the E250 Ford van meets your requirements for windows and the floor being lowered 9 inches. It's designed so that the floor can be lowered without losing any support. The van is heavy duty and can handle the extra weight from your chair and lift. The camera fades to black. The camera now shows them sitting around table. Dave is looking at an option list and discussing it with the vendor. Dave. So Bill, you're saying that the van is heavy duty and the standard includes heavy duty shocks and leaf springs. And I can add various extras, such as a heavy-duty alternator for the lift, since the weight of my chair and me will put a heavy drain on the battery. Bill. That's right, Dave. According to this spec sheet, a heavy-duty alternator is recommended to keep the battery drain to a minimum due to all the power required to get you into the van. Also, light truck tires will help support the extra weight. Dave. Sounds like a lot of technical stuff, Bill. It was a good idea to see my adaptive driving specialist and van conversion company before coming in. I wouldn't have had any idea about all these extra things. It appears that this van will meet my modification needs and my price range. And with your suggestions for the bigger alternator and truck tires, it will also be safer. Thanks. Let's go ahead and process paperwork to order. In all honesty, Bill, you know there are a couple of other vans that can accommodate lower floors, and I have researched what's available on the internet and consulted friends who don't have a Ford. But I like Fords, it's my personal preference, and here we are. Bill. Great, Dave, glad we could help and you chose Ford. I am going to get the paperwork together and I'll be right back. The camera shows close-up of Dave. Dave. Well, that's that. It was helpful to have a vendor who was knowledgeable. This part of the process can be time-consuming, but it's critical to select the right vehicle. As I mentioned to Bill, there is a possibility that other van or minivan manufacturers can meet your needs. If you have a preference, you should always talk to a rehab specialist first, get specs and an equipment needs list, and consult with them to see what's possible. If you're looking at a new make or model, they have the necessary training, contacts, and experience to let you know what's possible. You may need to go to several dealerships to talk to a salesman who is knowledgeable about what the manufacturer can provide and who makes you feel comfortable. It's important that you're comfortable in the car or van. If you're able to drive or transfer yourself, you should try transferring in and out. You need to be able to get your wheelchair or walker in if you're driving alone. You need to make sure you have room for the hand controls and adequate legroom. Once you've transferred into the driver's seat, you need to make sure the dashboard is within reach. You should be able to access the air vents and controls, the radio, and the light switches comfortably without loss of balance, while still maintaining control of the vehicle. You may need someone to come with you to test drive the car or van. The camera fades to black. Blue screen appears. Narrator voice. Steps to vehicle selection. Discuss your needs and ideas with a CDRS first. Get his or her recommendations and a spec sheet. Discuss what you will need in a vehicle with your conversion company. Get recommendations from them for makes and models that will meet your specifications to make sure you choose the proper van or car. Find out what assistance may be available to offset the cost of the conversions. Your rehab specialist or conversion company can help point you in the right direction. Research on the internet and consult with others who have completed a conversion or have experience in the field. The camera fades to black. Narrator. Now that we've completed the process, let's review each of the steps along the way. Feel free to stop the video to take notes, jot down steps, thoughts, etc. White lettering. If driving is a possibility, a list of pre-driving tests appear one at a time, and the narrator recites them. Pre-driving evaluation. Motor ability. Balance testing. Cognitive screening. Visual perceptual testing. Reaction time testing. Narrator. If you successfully pass your pre-driving test, here are the next steps necessary to drive. A list appears in white wording, and the narrator recites it. Driving to-do list. Successfully pass the pre-driving evaluation. Speak with an adaptive driving specialist about adaptive driving equipment. Speak with an adaptive driving specialist and conversion company about vehicle possibilities, but don't purchase anything until you're licensed. Get driving training using proper adaptive equipment in the vehicle. Become licensed by taking the driver's test. The camera fades to blue. A list appears in white wording, and the narrator recites it. Car conversion considerations. Transmission, automatic or manual. Number of doors and access for driver and passengers. Mobility device storage, wheelchair, walker, or scooter. Adequate space for full excursion of controls. The camera fades to blue. A list appears in white wording, and the narrator recites it. Steps to vehicle selection. Discuss your needs and ideas with a certified driver rehab specialist. Discuss what you will need in a vehicle with your conversion company. Get recommendations from your conversion company for makes and models that will meet your specifications so you can choose the proper van or car. If you're using a car, go over specifications with the salesman to ensure that the manufacturer can meet those needs. Ask what rebates might be available to offset the cost of the conversions. The camera fades to blue. A list appears in white wording, and the narrator recites it. Conversion checklist. Make sure the conversion meets your needs. Try to foresee any future changes. Stay in touch with all parties through entire process. Communicate with the support staff. Important. Don't be afraid to ask questions. The camera fades to blue. A list appears in white wording, and the narrator recites it. Sources of information. Certified driver rehab specialist. Van conversion companies. Internet library and rehabilitation centers. Converted van or car owners, great source. The camera fades to black. The camera shows Dave in a comfortable room. Dave. It seems like a lot, doesn't it? By breaking it down and using others' experiences and knowledge, you will make your experience in getting your new modified van or car a smooth and easy process. By bringing all these resources into the decision-making process, keeping everyone in the loop, and being aware every step of the way, you will make your modified vehicle experience both rewarding and enjoyable. My new van. Another view of my new van. Remember to ask questions and take notes. I hope your driving experience will once again be fun and enjoyable. Happy motoring. The end. The screen credits roll. Music plays softly in background. Dave. I'm sure that for some the script may have seemed long, but the actual time spent working through the many details involved in considering transportation suited for you is extensive. Read through and take notes to share with the professionals involved with your vehicle considerations. Follow along with me through the script several times, going along through the steps and processes I've outlined above. You may find the experience of realizing the perfect transportation to fit your needs a smoother and easier process than you thought it would be initially.